What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome back to more C4. We're continuing our Philadelphia Eagles preview ahead of the 2023 NFL Draft. We're going position group by position group and talking about some prospects that I really like for the Philadelphia Eagles to target in the 2023 NFL Draft. And I'm trying to feature players that could be drafted at multiple draft picks for the Philadelphia Eagles. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the wide receivers and the tight ends. I'm going to kind of group the receivers here together. I've already broken down the quarterbacks and the running backs. And tomorrow, we're going to finish up the offense by taking a look at some offensive linemen who could become new enrollees at Jeff Stoutland U. But today, I want to talk about the tight ends and the wide receivers. Starting with the tight ends, this is an interesting one because I'm not for sure thinking the Eagles are going to take a tight end because clearly we have Dallas Goedert in there. And it's all about how they feel about Grant Calcaterra. Jack Stoll, as you can see here on the depth chart, I mean, he's rosterable as a tight end. I felt like, you could do a lot worse and he can block. So that's fine. We got Dalton Keene, who was a decent, I think he was like a 4th-round pick for the Patriots. But for me, drafting a tight end is all about how the team feels about 6th-round pick last year, Grant Calcaterra, who, I mean, it is peak. When he was at Oklahoma before he retired, and then he came out of retirement, I think he went to SMU. But when he was at Oklahoma, he was a guy that I thought was going to be, a top 3, top 5 tight end in that class. Had some injury issues, and obviously last year didn't really have a whole lot of opportunities to make a lot of impact. So the Philadelphia Eagles think Grant Calcaterra can take that step up next season. He might be penciled in as their tight end too, and we might not be even looking at a tight end till the UDFA range. And I don't have any tight ends. I'm only going to talk about 3 of them and I think all of them are going to be draftable. So tight end is a weird spot, but I will talk about some tight ends I think would be very interesting for the Philadelphia Eagles. But slot wide receiver, I like Quez Watkins probably as much as any Philadelphia Eagle content creator, more so from the Madden background side of things. But I do think Quez has a role, maybe not as a slot wide receiver. Call me crazy, but I think, maybe call me old school. I think the slot wide receiver should have your most reliable hands. Obviously, we have Quez running a bunch of different routes. I think what Quez does, and we've seen Nick Sirianni kind of mention this, is that like because of Quez's speed, Quez has speed that that no one else in this wide receiver room has. Maybe Devin Allen, but like that actually gets on the field. So I do think there's a bunch, and this is just assumed, haven't gone back and studied the tape to see if what the coaches are saying is true. But I do believe that to a certain extent that there is some of Quez's speed that is making A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith's life a little bit easier. So while you definitely want to see Quez step up, take his game to another level, stop with the drops, make some plays when his number's called upon, maybe this best role is not going to be as our slot wide receiver. Maybe Quez can be your shot play wide receiver use him like Jalen Guyton from the Chargers, where he's not very going to really get reps over Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, but he can still get, 400, 500 yards and get 20 yards a catch because he has that role within the offense. I think maybe I would explore that, and I really have been in my mock drafts trying to get at least one slot wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is where we are going to start here with the receivers. We might as well get the tight ends out of the way because this is going to be really quickly. There are 3 tight ends that I think would be interesting for the Philadelphia Eagles, and one of them is just an alien. One of them is just a guy that's like, I'd almost have to like take Jeff Stoutland's opinion on whether or not this is the right call or not, because when your scouting report is he acts as an extra offensive lineman with untapped, unheralded receiving upside, he during the combine on-field, it's combine on-field drills. Then again, that's also when I fell in love with Kenny Galladay, and we went on and played very well for the Detroit Lions and got it back from the Giants. Kind of sucked in, but I didn't really know a lot about Kenny Galladay's game, and then I watched him with the combine. I was like, that guy is really good. And that's kind of what I got out of Darnell Washington a little bit. Not, you look at his stats, 450 yards, 2 touchdowns at Georgia. It's point A is Brock Bowers exists, and Brock Bowers is going to be one of the best tight end prospects ever. And part B, it's like Georgia's not a prolific passing team. They are run the football, and he comes in. He's just kind of built like an alien. He's got to be like one of those, like we talk about Bijan Robinson in the first round, like luxury picks. Darnell Washington would be a luxury pick. If Jeff Stoutland thinks that he can like get this guy's blocking to be like the best blocking tight end, like right now his comp is like prime Mercedes Lewis mixed with current Mercedes Lewis as a blocker. And like Mercedes Lewis, like there's a reason why he's been in the league for 20 years. That is always stuff and a skill set that you were going to desire in an offense. And when you see a guy that's almost 6'7", 265, has this kind of just absurd shuttle time, 4.64. It's just, you got to be patient a little bit. You got to be patient a little bit because him developing as a receiver is gonna take a little bit. And we're viewing this as if he got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. He wouldn't have to be able to be that tight end too. If you made this investment, I know Washington would likely have to be a pick at 30 in the first round if we wanted a shot at them. Maybe if we trade down from 30, some team wants to jump up into the first round and we get a pick in like the 40s, you could probably get into that range, but likely he's going to be a top 30 player in this draft. But as far as a blocker, as far as an athlete, he's probably the best right now in this draft class at that tight end spot. That's, obviously you got Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion. That's just a ridiculous athlete. But in terms of like top tier first round type guys, and I feel like I wouldn't hate this because I'm so intrigued by what he could develop into. But then it also comes down to like, how did we feel when we drafted Dallas Goedert? We already had Zach Ertz on the roster. We kind of felt like, okay, I get it. I guess you could have two really good tight ends, but is this the best use of our top draft picks? I mean, the same thing needs to be considered when you're talking about Darnell Washington. A little bit more affordable of a tight end is a guy that just gives off big-time Dallas Goedert vibes for me when I was watching his tape at Iowa, and that is Sam LaPorta. Great athlete, getting that 901 on the RAS, 4.58 in the 40-yard dash. Great explosion grade, elite agility grade. He's been, over the last 2 years, one of the more productive tight ends in college football. 600 yards, 50 catches in back-to-back seasons, 2021, 2022. Last year was first-team All-Big Ten. And I just think he's just well-rounded. He's the kind of guy, like, he runs the tight end screens like Dallas Goedert. Like, that's one of the easiest correlations. You guys probably make the argument he's a better athlete than Dallas Goedert. He's not going to cost as much. He's a guy right now projected to go second and third round, somewhere in that range. So it's a tough position to project for the Philadelphia Eagles because I have no idea how they view the tight end spot and how much importance they want to put on a potential tight end too. But Sam LaPorta could kind of break that threshold of like, if he's there in the third round and he's fallen a little bit, maybe you're taking that under consideration. Hell, if Brian Johnson, new offensive coordinator, maybe he comes in, speaks to Sirianni and thinks we can run a little bit more 12-man. We can run a little bit more two tight end sets. Maybe we should prioritize getting another tight end in this year's draft class. Sam LaPorta looks like a guy that's going to be, I think, right now, the logjam of tight ends that are going in this year's draft class. Really, you got him, you got Kraft, you got Washington, you got Luke Musgrave, you got Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, Kincaid from Utah, formerly of San Diego University. I think there's a chance that LaPorta in that bubble, maybe more so on the lower end of that bubble, could be one of the better tight ends from that group. And the last tight end we're going to talk about is Josh Wiley, the tight end from Cincinnati. This is kind of the value pick. This is kind of like they do want to get a tight end when all is said and done. Get someone that can kind of block. Like I was thinking about Zach Kuntz. Zach Kuntz, I don't even have his RAS right now, but he was just, a guy that's 6'7" and ran a 4.55, 40-inch vertical, just ridiculous athlete. But he's a big wide receiver. He's kind of like Mike Gesicki. I think for Philadelphia, Goddard's always going to be your go-to receiver. If you get a tight end too, they kind of have to block. And I think Josh Wiley's like that next mix of like, he's a good athlete, has great size at 6'6", 4.69, almost the 9 on the RAS, but at least he can block a little bit. And I think that underrated as a receiver when he had a legit quarterback. Last year in Cincinnati, took a little bit of a step back because there's no more Desmond Ridder, but in both the years that he had, 2020, 2021 with Desmond Ridder, he was solid. He was very, very solid, like a 400-yard, 6 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons type player. Doesn't drop the football, has really solid hands. And I think that this is kind of like your day 3 tight end target for the Philadelphia Eagles. If you are in the segment of fans that want to see us address the tight end spot, but you want to do it late, I think of all those names, Josh Wiley is the tight end 2 that we could be looking for, maybe even a tight end 3 as he competes with Jack Stoll for reps. But tight ends, that's not the most exciting. Let's talk about some wide receivers here that the Philadelphia Eagles could consider. And I got just a bunch of different price points here because obviously this wide receiver class is kind of all over the place. We're going to start with if they want the wide receiver. If they want the first-round wide receiver, in my opinion, this year's draft class, and that is Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State. Now, maybe it's old, new school to have a slot wide receiver as your wide receiver 1 for years, people have always just prioritized if you can play on the outside and you have the upside to be an outside wide receiver, you're always going to rank those guys a little bit higher than slot wide receivers. But since the emergence of like Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Detroit Lions, you feel a little bit more comfortable being like, yeah, a slot wide receiver can be a freak for us. And Jackson Smith-Njigba for Philadelphia, we'd have to draft him at 10. I don't think there's any scenario, or if we trade down from 10 and into the teens, that could be our selection. But the 4.52, he was a guy that was just like, all right. The last full season that he played in 2021, 95 catches, 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns. And that's with a ridiculous wide receiver room at Ohio State. That's with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., and he absolutely went on. He was the alpha in that wide receiver room. That does not go unnoticed by me. And then he was like, what kind of speed? Is he going to run 4.6s? Like, he doesn't necessarily have that crazy juice. Runs a 4.52, which is plenty good. Puts up elite agility grades in the shuttle and the 3-cone, like almost all-time numbers in that. For a slot wide receiver, that is all you need to see. Like, this guy is so shifty. He finds a bunch of different ways to make opposing defenders look foolish in those short intermediate routes. Great hands. Maybe not the best hands. Had 6 drops in 2021, which is like his big year to evaluate his body of work. But I think from an athletic standpoint, for the build of a slot wide receiver, this is the guy. And the argument for Philadelphia is like you're not going to use a first-round pick on your 4th receiving option because even if he's amazing, he's not going to get more targets than A.J. Brown, than Devontae Smith, than Dallas Goedert. He's going to be that 4th option, and you can probably find more value. So while I think we had to highlight that Philly needs slot wide receivers, this is the best slot wide receiver in the class, it's unrealistic that we're going to use a first-round selection on our 4th receiver for next season. So I'm going to get a couple more reasonable deals, reasonable offers. We're going to move into the 2nd round where I believe Josh Downs, the wide receiver from North Carolina, is going to go. I think he's under. Wide receiver I'm not going to talk about is Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is another slot wide receiver. But again, he's going to go in the 1st round. I didn't want to highlight multiple guys in the 1st round. It's very unrealistic. But if we might as well get the best in Jackson Smith-Njigba. But Zay Flowers is another great slot wide receiver in this draft class. But Josh Downs, a little bit more affordable. I think you're going to get him in the 2nd round at some point. And clearly from his build, as you can tell, he is a slot wide receiver. I watched a lot of North Carolina. Drake May is going to be my quarterback draft crush next season. I think I really watched more North Carolina games than I did Florida Gator games last year because obviously Florida was playing at a Sun Belt level. But Josh Downs, back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons at North Carolina. Last season, he had just over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. Back-to-back first-team All-ACC. He has a proven track record as a receiver. And it's one of those things where it's like the only knock against him is his size. Like, literally, you can break down the athlete, and that breaks down the player. He's an outstanding football player. My pro comparison from him is Jahan Dotson, and we saw when he was healthy, Jahan Dotson looked like a great playmaker for the Washington Commanders last season. I think Josh Downs is going to be a slot wide receiver. He's going to offer a little bit of juice. He's going to be the kind of player that, like last year, only 3 drops on 94 catches. Really good hands, really reliable, and it's kind of the inverse of what we got out of Quez Watkins. He has that speed, maybe not the same 4.3 speed that Quez has, but he's plenty fast, an explosive athlete, more reliable hands. I think then, start looking in the 2nd round. It's a little bit more affordable for wide receivers. This was my sleeper wide receiver. I don't think he's a sleeper anymore after he tested. I literally made tweets saying this is my guy before he tested and put up truly absurd numbers, and that is Jonathan Mingo. He's a big slot. He is a guy that has played inside and outside, but he found his best success as a slot wide receiver at college. 220 pounds, 22 reps on the bench press, 4.46 in the 40-yard jazz, elite explosion grade in the vert and broad jump. Never had ridiculous numbers, which is kind of a trait of good Ole Miss wide receivers. A.J. Brown, Ole Miss, never had ridiculous numbers. DK Metcalf, Ole Miss, some injuries there, but never had ridiculous numbers. I think Jonathan Mingo is another guy to add that list. Ideally, we were hoping that Mingo would be like a 3rd, 4th rounder, but I think like as things have kind of tightened up here closer to the draft, there's a chance he sneaks into the 2nd round. But ideally, I'm going to phrase this and project this as he is a 3rd round pick. I'd be all about it. He's an alpha. He reminds me of everything that Nick Sirianni wants in a wide receiver. I would honestly say watching him play, he has like a little bit of Zach Pascal to him as it relates to the Philadelphia Eagles, where Zach Pascal was that dog, did the dirty work. And he's also just a ridiculous athlete. He doesn't drop the ball. Very sure hands. Averaged, I think, about 3 drops a season, which is pretty damn good for a college player. And I just think, like, ridiculously strong hands, a ridiculously powerful player. And I think he's the kind of guy. He's the kind of alpha that I want to add to the wide receiver room. If we're going for a slot, my number one dream slot in this year's draft class is Jonathan Mingo. Unfortunately, though, he seems to be a little less attainable. Because I do think that if Philadelphia does want to go and get a slot wide receiver, which I think they will, it's not going to be an expensive pick. I think we're going to be looking probably more so into a guy with traits on day 3. And I think, unfortunately, for the Eagles, Jonathan Mingo has played himself. I'm seeing mock drafts now, have him go in the second round fairly consistently. But he is one of my favorite players in this year's draft class. Would be dope if the Eagles could end up bringing him in. Another guy that I've kind of been a fan of for a minute, and that is Marvin Mims Jr. out of Oklahoma. I actually didn't expect him to run as fast as he ran at the Combine, but he went out and balled out 4.38, 39.5-inch vert. You got to remember, as a freshman in 2020, like everyone was thinking he was going to be the wide receiver one of this draft class, whatever you declared. Then the quarterbacks kind of fell off a cliff there at Oklahoma. You know, you went through the Spencer Rattler era, and I don't know, maybe just never got on too much with Caleb Williams. But, you know, he played his best football in 2022, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns last season, has great speed. He's going to be a slot wide receiver. I mean, again, the kind of knock very, very much with Josh Downs is these guys here don't have the greatest size. But you know what team has had success recently by getting undersized wide receiver and just trusting that, like, this guy with his athleticism and his technical ability is going to win at the next level? It was Devontae Smith and the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think some of these undersized guys are definitely not, you know, while some teams might just completely write them off, or at least at the valuation that some teams, you know, like Philadelphia, where we value the football player, would draft. Like, you know, there's going to be some teams that are going to say, oh, 5'10", 180 pounds, like that guy's a 6th-round pick. Versus, like, someone's like, holy shit, this guy can get open, doesn't drop the football, we'll grab him in the 4th round. And I think that's a team like Philadelphia where you can jump and pounce on someone that is going to be a nice slot that I think gives you a little bit more of that Quez Watkins. If Philly really wanted Quez Watkins to offer that pure speed from the inside, but it just didn't really work out. Marvin Mims is kind of like how you can pivot off of that. Get a similar style player that brings you similar juice, and I just think a little bit higher ceiling right now. So Marvin Mims and Jonathan Mingo, in terms of like where I could see Philadelphia realistically selecting a slot wide receiver, those are my 2 favorite names in this year's draft class. Beyond that, we got Tank Dell. Speaking of just small-ass players. 5'8", 165 pounds. Very small, but very good. He's a very, very good player. He has 90 catches, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns in 2021. 109 catches, 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns last year. The production is absolutely off the charts. And again, I almost just make this pairing, A, because I think he's going to be a slot wide receiver, clearly with this build at the next level. B, Philadelphia is not scared of these undersized players because we know you got that dog in you. You're going to be able to contribute and play in our offense at the next level. And I just think ridiculous short, like, you know, I saw some routes from the Senior Bowl, and he was just literally looked like he was playing Dance Dance Revolution on some of these routes, just putting guys in absolute blunders on the line of scrimmage and finding ways to get open. So he's a very dynamic, very creative route runner. Pretty solid hands. I mean, his drops, he had 11 drops last year, 9 drops this year in 2022, but he's also getting like an absurd amount of targets. So, you know, you would like to see the drops not be that high, but I think when all is said and done, this is a guy that's probably going to be in that 3rd, 4th, 5th round range that I think would be an excellent upgrade at slot for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now I have 2 value picks, 2 guys that I don't know where they're going to go. I'm just going to put them in this video as day 3 selections. One is Keyshawn Boote, the wide receiver from LSU. I have not given up. Seems like a lot of people have kind of got off the Keyshawn Boote. Let's get this nice and shot here. Hype train. You got to remember, there was a point in time in 2020. Maybe I'm just stuck in 2020 where he was the next big thing. There was a thing in 2020 where he had 308 yards in a single SEC game as a freshman. And then it's just all been downhill. 2021, 2022, there's been some injuries, some off the field. Actually, a pretty substantial injury, which a lot of people are kind of tossing that up. Injury and a lack of work ethic for how badly he tested. This is just my Hail Mary pick. If he's going to play at the next level, he's going to be a slot wide receiver. And it's just, if he's still there in the 7th round, given the upside, he could be a head case, could be playing the XFL. But if he's still somehow there in the 7th round, this was a 5-star recruit. There's kind of a theme with the other wide receiver we're going to talk about. Like, just see what they still got. Maybe a change in environment to a professional environment. You're going to be able to get the best available. He's only 20 years old, so he's one of the younger wide receivers in this year's draft class. Just take a shot that, like, you might be able to bring out what we saw in 2022. If the injuries are too much, if he's a guy that can't get out of his own way, you only burned a 7th-round pick. But if he can emerge and become that player that we thought he was going to be in 2022, I would not mind buying a ticket to that lottery in the 7th round. And the last one is another former 5-star recruit, and that is Rakeem Jarrett, the wide receiver from Maryland. A little bit better of an athlete. He was a big-time player coming out. He was one of those surprise signings. It's like, wow, 5-star recruit, number 4 overall wide receiver in 2020, and he went to Maryland. So, didn't have a lot of crazy production in Maryland. His best year was 2 years ago in 2021, 800 yards, 5 tutties. Inconsistent quarterback play at Maryland. They got Baby Tua down there. Inconsistent is the fair way. But he's a good athlete, 5'11", running a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash, 8.41 RAS. And I just think this is very much fits in the bubble of high recruit. Didn't really put it all together in college. Let's get that 7th-round flyer. I think he played a lot of slot. Always lined up exclusively in the slot, according to Dane Brugler's write-up on Rakeem Jarrett. So it definitely fits what we're looking for. He's 22 years old, former 5-star recruit. Very much in line with what I said for Keyshawn Boote. It's just a guy that might still have his... Like, I just want to take swings on these former 5-star players that might have their best football ahead of them. I felt like Philadelphia kind of did that with Isaac Seumalo. For those who don't know, Isaac Seumalo was like the rare 5-star guard. Wasn't ridiculous at Oregon State, but we took the gamble on the player and the traits, and we made Isaac Seumalo into a very, very solid starting NFL player. And I like that approach. I think there's a bunch of different philosophies that could be, a theme for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? How he builds through the trenches and how he likes to draft athletes at tackle and send them Jeff Stoutland U. I would love a new mantra for the Philadelphia Eagles in terms of drafting is in the 7th round, late day 3. Get as many of these 5-star kids as you possibly can and just see if a brand new spot, a fresh start, is all they need to finally live up all to their potential. Or, they could be busts. We've seen it. There's a reason why busts exist, especially from a high school to college level in terms of busts. It is what it is. It happens all the time, and maybe these are wasteful picks, but if they are wasteful picks, at least they're in the 7th round, and you're not taking that swing, day 2, 3rd, 4th round, somewhere in that range. So Rakeem Jarrett, Keyshawn Boote, let's see if they're still there in the 7th round. And both those guys could offer some upside for the Eagles at the slot wide receiver spot. So let me know what you guys think about it in today's video. Do you think we should target a slot wide receiver? Did I miss anybody? Which is your favorite of all the players that I talked about? Let me know in the comment section below, as well as the tight ends. Do you think we draft a tight end? Or do you think we just give Grant Calcaterra a bigger opportunity next season? But that'll do it for me today, guys. We'll be back tomorrow highlighting some offensive linemen that I think, again, should enroll in Jeff Stoutland U. Should be a good one. I'll see you then. Till then, though, it's your boy C4. Say like, subscribe, all that cheesy YouTuber stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.